Wow, what a day. It's Friday, and we are just inundated with all kinds of breaking news, what to make of it all. That's what we're all about. So proud to be here every single day for you, especially on a huge day like this. There's some bad news, of course, with the economy, but we knew that was coming. We expected it. The nation has lost a record 20.5 million jobs in April. This is the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Right now, the unemployment rate is around 14.7%, which is disastrous. Here's some good news. And this is something that we're trying to kind of absorb, but we're starting to look at data that suggests that, for example, our death rate as compared to a country that didn't shut down or lock down is not that dramatically higher. Talking, of course, about Sweden, and I saw an article in the New York Post with some data that grabbed my attention, and I was kind of stunned by it. I'm going to break that down for you in just a moment. Meanwhile, just a gigantic day for the swamp and draining the swamp and the deep state under sort of siege by the Justice Department, as you probably heard by now. The Justice Department is ending dropping the case that Robert Mueller brought against Michael Flynn. The former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Flynn, was to be Trump's first national security advisor. They went after him in a huge way. Andy McCarthy over the New York Post calls it a travesty of justice, what they did to him. The way they set him up, apparently, with a perjury trap, the way they targeted him, the Obama administration didn't want him, and they tried to take him out, and he lost everything. As McCarthy writes, General Flynn can never be made whole for the financial and emotional ruin wrought on him and his family over the last 3 years. But the prosecution's decision to admit its case was baseless is better for Flynn than a pardon would have been. Real important to hear that again. The decision by the prosecution, the Justice Department, to admit its case was baseless is better for General Flynn than a pardon would have been. And yet they're still screaming and howling about the Justice Department being politicized. It's unreal. Meanwhile, there are louder cries for Joe Biden to drop out and to not be the Democrat nominee for president. There was something that played yesterday that was so embarrassing, a disastrous campaign rally, a virtual campaign rally, that is, where a confused Joe Biden was trying to grapple with technical and all kinds of glitches. It was bad. Here's the Washington Post headline: Biden virtual Tampa rally runs into glitches, awkwardness, and blank screens. This is the Washington Post's coverage of this. They introduced me? A blurry Joe Biden asked 5 seconds after he appeared on screen. Am I on? For a campaign seeking a substitute for the rousing events that Biden would be holding if not for the coronavirus, intones the Washington Post. The first of its kind rally served as a tough lesson about the perils of remote campaigning that played out in real time. Calling it a disaster is an understatement. Here's a little bit of what it sounded like yesterday from here in Tampa, apparently a virtual rally that did not go very well for Joe Biden.
Please welcome Vice President Joe Biden.
Dead air.
Introduce me? Alan? Hey, good evening, Tampa. Thanks so much for tuning in. I wish we could have done this together and it gone a little more smoothly, but I'm grateful we were able to connect virtually.
The whole thing it was a disaster. It was a debacle, amazing debacle. Now let's face it, even in the middle of this pandemic, we're a few months away from a November 3rd election, where Americans are going to decide, is that guy whose team can't even host a live stream campaign rally going to be able to run the country with all the challenges we face? I don't see it. I don't see it. Maybe you do. I don't know. I got so many questions. I see this headline. I got to share this with you. And incidentally, there's so much. How about the NFL announcing its schedule? Wow, what a day to be here. I mean, listen, I don't have enough time today to get everything in. Breaking news after breaking news. It's a day that we cannot miss. And I'm glad you're with me today here in the ReliefFactor.com studios as we made it to another Friday. It's the first full Friday, the first full week in May coming to a close. Before you know it, we will be in June, and we're going to get closer and closer to this thing ending and America getting back to the America we know and love. Well, we always love it, but one that we recognize. Let me share this headline that got my attention, and I saw it yesterday. The New York Post, I read it a lot. Sweden sees higher coronavirus death rate than U.S. after refusing lockdown. Now, remember the other day I got the call from the big liberal young lady in Massachusetts. She wanted to argue with me. What was her name? Emily, I think. I forget her name. Emma in Massachusetts. And she did, she lied to my screener and said, "Oh, I really support the governors opening up the states." Then she went opposite, and I knew she would, and that's all right. We had a disagreement. And she said, all the scientists and the experts agree that shutting down the country saved millions of lives, lots of lives. Shutting down the nation, locking America down really made the difference. And I said, but Emma, what do you have to compare it to? And I got to thinking about it afterwards. Let's look at Sweden. It's not exactly the North Pole. It's not the United States, but there are big populated areas of Sweden, like Stockholm, for example. So they didn't lock down. Here's the headline I saw. Sweden sees higher coronavirus death rate. Here's the death rate. Their death rate in Sweden is 297.16 for every 1 million citizens, right? This is data provided by Johns Hopkins University. 296.16 for every 1 million citizens. You want to know what ours is? Ours is 226.33 deaths per 1 million people, according to the data. Now, it's terrible. It's awful for Sweden. It's awful for United States. It's awful for the world. Can I repeat those two numbers for you for just a minute? The United States, which locked down, turned out the lights, shut us down. Now we got 14.7% unemployment with 20.5 million jobs lost in April alone. We have a death rate of 226.33 deaths per 1 million people. Sweden has 297.16 death rate for every 1 million citizens. Do you understand my point? Their death rate isn't that dramatically higher than ours, despite the sort of deceptive headline in the New York Post. Further, Sweden still trails behind hard-hit European countries like the United Kingdom, France, and Spain, which all implemented lockdowns. So the point is, and Sweden, as you know, left most schools, stores, and restaurants open, instead calling on residents to self-regulate themselves when it comes to social distancing from one another. I think this is profound. I believe this is such a huge bit of data that helps us understand how to go forward. We can't go back. We can't undo what's been done. But my gosh, if it's true, and I want to see how you respond to this data, that our death rate isn't really that much dramatically below Sweden, they didn't shut down, and we did, maybe the opposition to the shutdown has a point. And maybe it's time to start opening this country up again. Of course we have to be careful. Of course we have to be safe. Of course we have to protect the vulnerable. But what do you make of these numbers?